I'd like to introduce Jane from, now of Slow Clothing. And I have to read it because it's always, I kind of default to, finding meaning in what we wear. I always go to say appreciating what we wear. Jane's a long-term ADC veteran, ag scientist, and someone who I think, with that kind of worldview has a real appreciation of where things come from and where they end up. So it's kind of another really interesting view, actually, that someone with your background ends up in clothing, but appreciates it in a way that's quite different, really, to others even doing the same thing as you. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
You're welcome. Thanks so much, Jennifer, for having me. And this is my Textile Beat studio, but it's also my home where I've lived for 3 decades, and it's traditionally Turrbal Jagera land. I grew up on a sheep farm, and that's where I developed my love of natural fibres that's continued through my career and my life. I've actually been a slow fashion practitioner for all of my life, making, mending, adapting, sometimes buying things, but, mostly always trying to keep everything going. And my career, as Jennifer mentioned, after raising the 3 children, you suddenly get to a point where, what do I really want to be doing? And when the 3rd child moved out of home, I thought, well, I'm stepping up here. I noticed fashion waste in 2011 at a Fashion for Flood fundraiser, and that encouraged me to actually step up and talk about textile waste and more sustainable ways of dressing. Clothes are integral to everyday life, and they're estimated to make up 10% of our footprint. Our food makes up about 20%. This is our individual footprint, and our choices around shelter, transport, entertainment, and that sort of thing make up the rest. So industry itself is now scrambling to solve some of the toxic problems associated with our clothes, and it's great what James Bartell's doing with Outland Denim, and the earlier story we heard from the Very Good Bra from Stephanie. They're fabulous solutions. I'm specifically interested in the opportunity for us to be more hands-on, to be creative, express our individuality by using what's already around us rather than feeling as if we've got to go out and buy some new ethically sustainable product. So there's been much more awareness in this space now, and I, at the current time, was meant to be travelling in the Northern Hemisphere because I've been awarded a Churchill Fellowship to study how upcycling can help us reduce textile waste and enhance wellbeing. We might be able to travel later this year, but at the moment I'm doing a virtual Churchill and doing things like this with Jennifer today, which is fabulous. So I want to play a little video made by Finn Buckle last year. Then I'll show you a couple of things that I've upcycled and talk about what I'm wearing now. And share some slides from my book, Slow Clothing, Finding Meaning in What We Wear, and then have a chat about some other things. So what I need to do now is work out how to share the screen, click the boxes to the left and share, and then play the video here. So how's that going?
My love for nature is expressed in my love for natural fibres. I enjoy how they feel, so comfortable to touch and wear. I studied agricultural science and worked in journalism and communications before leadership study led me to slow clothing philosophy. In 2011, I noticed fashion excess and learned we buy up to 4 times what we need. In fact, Australians are the 2nd largest consumers of textiles in the world. A lot is wasted. 6,000 kilograms of textiles and clothing go to landfill every 10 minutes. It's concerning that 2/3 of new clothes are made from synthetic fibres, polyester and acrylic. They're derived from petroleum and shed microplastic into our ecosystem. These are some of the reasons I set up Textile Beat in 2013 to share ideas for sustainable, ethical and creative ways of dressing. Our clothes do for us on the outside what food does inside. They protect and warm our bodies and influence the way we feel and present to the world. My book, Slow Clothing, Finding Meaning in What We Wear, is about how we choose, wear and care for clothes so they bring value, meaning and joy. It brings together everything I know about living lightly through everyday practice. Responsible choices and actions that we can take are to think more, choose natural fibres, buy quality local and not too many clothes, take care of what we have by mending, repairing, and learn to make, revive, adapt and salvage. We share these ideas through Slow Clothing talks, workshops and community activities. We learn how to make a difference through our everyday choices, because when we dress for health and well-being rather than status and looks, we become mindful and resourceful, more conscious of what we wear and the impact it has on our world.
Now, how did we go with that? Jennifer, was that working okay?
You're a legend.
Oh, thank you for Finn for producing that little video. It's great. Like, it summarises, I guess, what I'm going to run through now. I'd just like to show you up a little bit closer the coat that I was mending in that video. This is actually, it's 100% cashmere. And so that's a beautiful natural fibre. I actually bought it in Toronto pre-loved, and over time it's kind of worn. I'm using 4-ply Tandy wool, which is an Australian, Victorian wool producer in that lovely thread. And that's what, just over time, I'm continuing to embellish that. And I feel it just, by putting your own energy in things, you feel like you own them a little more. One of the other examples that I've just got here to show you, sometimes people say, oh, you know, they don't have a sewing machine, they can't sew. So this one is a pair of skinny jeans that were from the op shop. You can use, if you're worried about buying secondhand like that, you can just use maybe your daughter's or, you know, your son's cast-offs or your own cast-offs. So this is all just done with hand stitching. And at the side, I've just used a little eyelet and joined them together. And that, you know, can go over any number of things. The red dress that I was wearing in that little video, it's made from 5 garments. One was from my own wardrobe, this one here, and the others were from the op shop. And I just thought I'd show you the close-up where you might be able to see that the dart in the original garment was unpicked. So I've just used these lovely resources that the little silkworms have already done their jobs, and, you know, it's just nice to be able to continue to value them in a new way, I think, rather than feeling as if you've got to go out and source something new. And once you wash them with those beautiful products like we heard Chrissy talk about, you know, like all your handmade DIYs, like there's no sense of real germs in them, you know, and you can wash them a couple of times if you're worried. Here's another one that I've made out of 2 jumpers. This is actually a long skirt. You can see the bottom and the top. I've joined them together and done what's called reverse applique circles there. And so the piece I cut out from here is up here. But anyway, not everyone's interested in that. So I'll move on to my PowerPoint now. And so I believe I need to share the screen again and do that. Is that sharing for you? Or did I not share? Share there. And then maximize. How's that going? There.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. So that's that dress I just showed you, and that's from Fashion Revolution. I'm talking about I made my clothes. And this is actually all about doing your own slow fashion. Of course, you can buy lovely products. as well, but this is about being more engaged and having agency and autonomy by doing some of it yourself. Part of what motivates me is that, you know, the earth is clearly under pressure. I trained as a climate reality leader last year, and this year, although I didn't necessarily put out anything about it, but Earth Day was 50 years old. And, you know, so we've still got a lot of work to do when you look at the ecological issues that are happening around us. So really, as I mentioned before, I just started where I was. I used what I had to hand, and I'm doing what I can. And, you know, I've really noticed a considerable shift since I began this advocacy, just using the resources that I had to hand. My background, I was a rural journalist for quite a while with the ABC and also with newspapers. And then I went into advocacy. One of the campaigns I did was the Save the Aussie Banana campaign for the Australian banana industry. And, you know, so I've sort of got a background with that. And I was selected for the Australian Rural Leadership Program. And those photos at the bottom are from our trip to India, where, you know, you do get that big picture global view and start to think about leadership is an action you take. It's not a position or a title you hold. So I just brought all of that together. My background, my values, I work from a values perspective around being authentic, being creative, having autonomy, and actually having a purpose in life to create change through, you know, speaking, sharing ideas, mentoring, and actually creating community events or being influential in creating events such as Revive, Brisbane's secondhand fashion festival. It puts Brisbane City Council the first in the world to do that. And that came about from an address I gave to the council chamber in 2015. It's about the future generations. This is my little grandson, and we just have another young grandson born last week. So it's very exciting in that way. And this is just the timeline that I've been through. 2014 was pivotal because I did the Sew It Again project, where every day I was upcycling and sharing ideas and talking about it, and everything sort of flowed on from that point to now, you know, having my book out and being a Churchill Fellow. So just briefly, I know that Stephanie touched on this, but, you know, this is how all the issues link together. We've got the modern day slavery, which is a huge problem, and particularly at the moment with this pandemic, it's terrible to think about what's happening in the supply chain to those workers. We've got the rise of cheap synthetic fibres, which is where my particular drive was to step into this, because I noticed that most of the clothes were synthetics, and I was thinking, where are the natural fibres? And those two things together have enabled us to increase our consumption, particularly in Western countries, to up to 4 times more than what we were using, creating a lot of waste and pollution, and also the loss of skills and knowledge about where clothes come from and how we can mend them or adapt them or keep them going. So this is a graph that I originally dug out from a couple of different sources and put together and kept updating. I've only done 2016. I don't believe it's changed that much. 2/3 of our fabric is synthetic, mostly polyester. So your main choices here are polyester or cotton, which is the significant natural, the most dominant natural fibre. So I figured that this Albert Einstein quote is inspirational, really, because, you know, it just says we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use to create them. And that's been expressed in all the talks today, is about solving a problem and coming up with a solution. So my thinking around this was, you know, we needed a different narrative, a non-fashion narrative. So that's why I talk about clothing. And slow clothing to me is a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about choosing and wearing and caring for clothes to ensure they bring value, meaning and joy to every day. And it's also thinking, because of my background in food, and I watched the whole food story arise, you know, with all the cooking shows and everything, we'd become very focused on, as a response to fast food, you know, where our food comes from. And I could see that there was a similar narrative sitting alongside that, that thinking about our clothes doing for us on the outside, what food does inside, and ways that, you know, that they protect and warm our bodies and influence how we feel and present to the world. So our clothing does matter very much. But this led me to put this in my, you know, homespun ideas, which are really all they are. And I'm just expressing, well, this is what I do. You know, it's different to the narrative that I always felt was over there. And I'm thinking, I don't do any of that. So I've just talked about what I do. And it's dressing for health and well-being rather than status and looks. And Craig Rucastle from War on Waste, he launched the book for me in 2017. This is at the Happen store in Sydney, a fabulous place where handmade arises. Costa Georgiadis, you know, I just love watching Gardening Australia, and with the lockdown, you know, I've really spent a lot of time in the garden, you know, getting more of the herbs going and really kind of enjoying that. And I've found some little blue-banded bees on my basil, and, you know, these things are really important to health and well-being. So I really appreciate that Costa launched that in Melbourne for me. And then Richard Dennis in Canberra, he launched it at the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation office. And, you know, he's fabulous because, you know, his book, Curing Affluenza, is really all about, you know, the fact that buying stuff doesn't make us happy. And he talks about materialism, valuing our products rather than consumerism, buying more products. So this is distilled in my book. And, you know, I came up with the Slow Clothing Manifesto in 2015. And it's stayed pretty much the same since then, because, you know, these are all the actions and choices that we can take to make a difference. And I realise that not everyone wants to sew and not everyone wants to upcycle. So the other things that we can do are listed there, and I'm going to quickly go through most of them. I'm just conscious of the time. So thinking before you buy anything. You know, when you come up to it, you realise that anything you bring into your home, you've either got to use it up or you've got to ship it out at some point and move it on, either by donating it somewhere. We've seen some terrible scenes about things going off to being dumped at op shops over time, or you put it in your rubbish bin and it becomes landfill. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm perfect, but, you know, I have been really conscious about buying anything, like if I got something already like this, or how long am I going to need it for, and all those things. So thinking is the top of the tree in terms of action. And then looking at the natural fibres, some, you know, the cotton, linen and hemp. Well, cotton is a lot of cotton grown in Australia. Cotton and wool are the main things we grow. There's a little bit of alpaca and some of those other goat hairs there. But they're the dominant fibres in Australia. The cotton, linen and hemp are from plants. I mean, I don't know how much knowledge you have there, but, you know, wool, alpaca, cashmere, leather and silk, they're all from animals. And then these other fibres, they're reconstituted or cellulosic fibres on the right. And tencel was the fibre that Stephanie's using in her bras, for example. And a lot of them come from trees or plant being reused. And that's actually, I enjoy those fibres, and I think they are arising unless they're created by felling, you know, forests, then they're not necessarily desirable. But I know the tencel and the lensing press is closed system, and they're actually growing trees to harvest to produce that fibre. So the plastic fibres, polyester is the dominant one. You've also got acrylic, nylon, lycra and polypropylene and others and often they're blended with some of the other natural fibres, and that's a problem downstream when you're trying to separate and reuse the fibres, which is what's sort of happening now. There's a lot more interest in that. But just reflecting on the natural fibres, you know, this is a quote from my book and it's come from a quote that I love, that eating is an agricultural act. And that was a statement from Wendell Berry, a US food activist. And I thought, well, if we're wearing natural fibres, we have to realise that dressing is an agricultural act if we want to wear them. And it's actually thinking about that bigger picture about where they come from and supporting it. And I know there's lots of issues around water consumption, particularly with cotton. And we can talk to that in the question time, perhaps, if you want to. Quality is really important because there's no use by date on simple, natural, well-made clothes. We can wear them until they wear out. And I've been trying to wear out clothes now. That's one of my ambitions, is to try and wear clothes enough until I've worn them out. And if they don't work for me, because I'm adapting, if they're suitable, I will gift them or donate them somewhere. But if they're not, I think about how I can adapt them. But basically, if you have quality and quality fibres, they do last a long time, and that's important. In terms of local brands, well, you know, I should have the very good bra and Outland denim there as well. You know, these are some of the other ones that I'm aware of that I know. You know, Bestowed is a Brisbane brand, and they make all their own clothes here on site. Merino Country is local wool. Farm to Hanger is using local cotton, and there's also a growing number of custom makers and small makers that's the way we can support local. And I think with the pandemic, we're really seeing the problem with our supply chains where systems are broken. And so I do think that local manufacturing will be arising as a result of what we've observed through this time. Caring for your clothes is really important. I've got these 3 men here. They're from some of my mending workshops, and I love to put them up there because I think men mending is a really good thing. It's traditionally seen as a female activity, and you know, I just think it's like all these DIY resourceful self-sufficiency skills. You know, we all need to be doing it. And also washing your clothes less, like not in the really hot weather, obviously you can't do it, but sometimes we overwash, and sponging. And I noticed from what Chrissy said earlier about rinsing it, if you spill some food on it, just rinse it off. Like often that's good enough, and you can just spot wash. You don't need to wash the whole thing. And also a lot of labels say dry clean only, but in reality, everything can be hand washed. Like old Chinese silk garments, they didn't have dry cleaning, they hand washed them. But the main thing is that sometimes the fit alters. So it's actually about, as long as there's room in the garment, then hand washing. Personally, I just hand slosh around a bit, spin in the washing machine, and then I shake it out and put it on a hanger to dry. And we've got a drying veranda, so it makes that a little bit easier, that drying part. But you know, that's a pretty straightforward process, and that's a way we can really extend the life of what we've already got. So moving into the more engaged section now, you know, with making, DIY life skills are arising, and sewing and stitching are just like cooking and baking. And they enable us to provide for ourselves and be resourceful. And I think we're really, you know, noticing a lot more people are talking about sewing these days than they were when I stepped into this. So, and the other reason that at least doing some sort of making or mending yourself is that until you've done that for yourself, for something to wear, you can't appreciate the resources, time and skill that go into the clothes we buy. And, you know, really the idea of a $5 or a $10 t-shirt, like they're too cheap for what they are. And when you know the time that's gone into it, you know, you appreciate it more and you're prepared to pay more. So, you know, we need to educate more around this, if for that reason alone. There's lots of ways to learn to sew. Just using a needle and thread is a fabulous way. There's heaps of online tutorials. There's groups like Common Stitch, which are up on the Sunshine Coast, that are selling you know, pre-cut packs where you can send a garment, you know, where you can order a garment and it arrives with everything you need. The others, we made it. Now they're in cans. Ministry of Handmade, but they're online. Obviously, we made it. Ministry of Handmade, Julie over there is doing some great things with a simple pattern. Carly and the Machine, she's another Brisbane. I realise we're talking bigger than Brisbane here, but Peppermint Magazine would be a place where they actually have online patterns. You know, there's approaching 100 there now, I think, which is fabulous entry point if you want to start, and just start simple. Don't try and do anything fancy. It's really basic and not necessarily closely fitted either, because you'll always have a success that way. So moving to Revive on the Slow Clothing Manifesto, this is a bit of a controversial comment that I've had put out there, but really secondhand is actually organic. You know, when we buy pre-loved clothes, we're not adding any chemicals, new chemicals to the environment or extra production stress. And the thing about that is that really, that's, if you really want to do the right thing, buy pre-loved if you can. And it's definitely, the stigma about that has passed. You know, even when I stepped into this arena, I went on ABC Radio in 2013 and said that, well, I wear secondhand clothes and I sew. And it was it felt risky to say that in public. But since then, I think, you know, there's a really great social status almost in wearing pre-loved. So I think that's a good thing. I know there's pressure for consumerism and buying more things and, you know, pumping along the economy. As we noticed after the GFC, there was all this pressure to buy things. But, you know, we've actually got to own our own conscience there. And my conscience is saying to me that I've actually personally got enough. So maybe it's other people that have got to do the buying up. So adapting, you know, this is where I really enjoy all these values. Some of these points I distilled from my 2014 project. Upcycling's creative, you know, and you actually learn to adapt things by playing. It's individual. It's limitless. I've upcycled some things 3 and 4 and 5 times, and they can eventually become rags in the end if you really doesn't work. It's mindful, it's empowering, and it's ethical. And, you know, there's heaps of other adjectives to describe it. And the 10th point on the manifesto is about salvaging. I mentioned, you know, rags, you can use clothes for all sorts of things. This is when you haven't got anywhere else for them to go. And I was really curious. I did my first experiment in 2018 around this. I buried some little swatches in my garden downstairs and left them there for a year. My husband, fortunately, was watering them every, you know, few weeks or once a month. And after 11 months, like, a lot of the natural fibres had completely disappeared, including the leather. All the synthetics were still hanging there looking perfect, as if they'd just had a hard night. So I then, the following year, like last year, we did a composting experiment over at Carindale, and they went into a compost bin for 3 months. Now, I didn't have a similar as they went in type photo. Unfortunately, they were just arranged individually, but you can see that the cotton has almost disappeared, that those threads there are actually the polyester thread that's left after the little bugs have done their job. The linen's well on the way, as is the viscose and the wool. The silk, I was surprised. I thought it might have decayed a bit, but it might have been, it was in the end of the bin where it was a bit warmer, so it might not have had so much water, but it will eventually break down. But the lycra at the bottom is just almost as it went in. So it really does show that the forever. So in terms of taking action, these are the things that, this is what I suggest to people. Stop buying for a while. Study what you need and what your what stage of life you're at. Just reflect on what you need and then sort out what you've already got, because a lot of us in Western countries have got overflowing wardrobes and different things. But, so you really need to sort that and mend things that need a fix up or move along other things that you can donate responsibly, or maybe turn into rags. And then it's about going forward, it's seeking responsible choices. So doing your research, just like all of these things we've been talking about here today. So my last slide is also a return to the food analogy. And Michael Pollan is an American journalist who's written a lot of books, one of which is In Defense of Food. And this was in response to the whole fast food push. And he wrote an eater's manifesto, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So I, in my book, wrote a wearer's manifesto, which is wear clothes, have few and mostly natural fibres. And I think that'll set you on quite a good pathway. So that's all of my slides that I had there. So I'll stop the share and we'll come back to you, Jennifer, hopefully. I guess there are big changes coming down the line. You know, the fires that we've experienced, the coronavirus pandemic, they're all reflections of what's happening in our ecosystem and reflecting our interactions with nature. So we've got to adapt and look for ways that we can make positive change in our own life. So we know that ever-increasing infinite consumption is not possible in a finite world. So that's why I choose to extend the life of things that I've already got, and focusing on, you know, quality, locally made garments that we love and we can wear for longer. Some, just thinking bigger picture, some of the noticeable shifts in what we wear that people I find talking about are muted colours from nature and compostable clothes will be going mainstream. I'm actually wearing, this is a wool jumper that I got from the free clothes bin in Canberra a few years ago when I was down there doing a talk, and I actually found two that were similar and they had some little holes in them, so maybe they hadn't been looked after too well, and I've just stitched them up. I've, you know, done some darning on it, and it's like my coat, you know, it's an ongoing process, and when you put your own energy into it, you kind of feel like you own the clothes. And I've also reshaped this one a bit and put it in an eco colour bath. This dress that I'm wearing, I don't know whether you can see it, if I hold the laptop up a little bit, you might be able to see that it's, it was white linen originally, and what I've done is I've used soy milk to put a pattern on it and dried that, and then I've put it in, we've had a lot of windy weather here, so we've had gum leaves fall to the ground, so I've been gathering them, the eucalyptus leaves, and just boiling them in a pot and putting a pattern on it with soy milk and putting it in there, leaving it overnight. Like, you only need to have the water warm for about 20 minutes, but then sitting it in the water until it goes cool is a great way of adding colour. So I've rejuvenated that. These beads on my wrist they were originally, and this here, it was originally a food, you know, like a fruit bowl. So it was, all the beads were made already, and it had been hanging around my family for decades. I think it was a wedding present to my mother and father, and I'd never wanted to get rid of it. And now I thought, oh, look, I'm not using it as a fruit bowl, I'll just break it up. And so I pulled out all the rusty wire that was in there, and I've just threaded this onto nylon fishing line. And, you know, now I've got that memory there. And the earrings that I'm wearing are from a macrocarpa tree that my friend down in Parkes sent up to me. She'd already done the holes in them, so it was quite easy to do that. And then this is also another silk scarf that I've eco-coloured. So, you know, there's always a story attached to it, and it's kind of an evolutionary process. I mean, we live in a world where evolution is kind of king, and I think all of our clothing, you know, can live other lives and have memory. I mean, this is the history skirt that was in my on the cover of my book, and I don't know whether you can quite see that, but those little bobbles, this was all leftover pieces of lace from garments our mother made us as children that had been held onto. So this was my entry into it. Mary Eade from Townsville makes beautiful history skirt. Well, she makes skirts. And I guess I extrapolated her idea to have a history skirt. This is a skirt with memory. This is a silk dress that I got from an op shop in Cairns. This is another part of that as well. And then there's these gorgeous shell buttons. So it's just a collage of memories and resources. And that was probably my entry point where I thought, you know, I'm just embracing this wholeheartedly. So some other books perhaps you might like to, I was speaking about the other trends. So muted colours, also non-fashion fashion, like I guess the issue we've been marketed to with fashion is that, you know, this is the latest, you've got to have this to keep up and look appropriate and whatever. And that's created a lot of problems of the churn. So I think now we're getting more functional and pragmatic, and also retreating from the idea that we've always got to have something new. It certainly is nice to have, you know, change and variety. So I'm not suggesting that we don't have anything new, but, you know, like it's just being thoughtful about it. Also, I think in future there'll be a lot more collaboration and co-creation where people without necessarily the skills, like I've just learnt by doing it over a long time. So I've got, you know, I probably undervalue a little bit about how much I know just from having done it. But, you know, there's lots of opportunities emerging where you can work with a designer to, you know, to make something or have something custom made for you from an old family tablecloth or something like that. We know the end of stuffication is here. And also I think there'll be, you know, just going back to that, those learning opportunities like you're setting up, Jennifer, with your eco channel. I think we'll have a lot more sharing of information through libraries and online libraries. There's actually clothing libraries now where you can swap clothes, and information seminars. I think they're really arising. Just sharing a couple of books that I'm reading. I was actually going to see Rebecca Burgess from Fibre Shed when I'm in the US. This is all about local fibre, developing local fibre industries. Marielle Chamberlain has, from Full Circle Fibres, she's set up local cotton. It does have to go offshore to be spun, but it comes back and it's fully traceable as having been grown on a farm in Queensland. And so I think the whole idea of local fibre is emerging alongside local food. And The Conscious Closet by Elizabeth Klein, that's a new one. I've ordered both these books from Avid Reader. And, you know, the good thing about this one is Elizabeth's actually been on a journey. She wrote an earlier book about the high cost of cheap fashion, Overdressed it was called, the shockingly high cost of cheap fashion. And now she's gone on a journey, you know, and this book talks about her evolution and what she's learnt in time. And she actually has some diagrams about mending and, you know, like she's learnt to do all this sort of thing. So she's a very modern, intelligent woman who is stepping forward in a different way. And of course, we've got our own Erin Lewis Fitzgerald. Modern Mending is the book. And there's also Katrina Rodebaugh has written a book called Mending Matters. And so I think all of these things are arising and really changing how we think about our clothes. So there's a lot of change. And it's exciting to, you know, have been in the game for a while reflecting this. So how's that? Any questions, Jennifer?
There's a few there. Do you want to just have a quick look?
Oh, yes, I can. Q&A. Thank you. What is that coming up right in the middle of our screen, or?
No, only you can see it.
Right, only me. Yeah, so what's the reason you use so much denim? Look, I love the denim. And I've actually moved away from it a bit now, but, you know, it's a very solid material, and it's also relatively easy to sew if you don't go over too many thick bits at once, because it stays where it is. And we know that it uses a lot of resources in its production. So I guess it's just respecting the denim. Also, I can't personally wear jeans because I'm the wrong shape for it. So that's why I turn it into dresses. So I can think, well, I can wear denim in a different way. So that's the answer to that question. I know this isn't your main point, but do you sell the garments you make? No, I don't actually sell any garments. I did have some excess during my Sew It Again year, and I moved a few on through reverse garbage, but I don't sell garments. And one of the reasons I don't goes to that point about until we make it with our own hands, we don't appreciate it. And also, we've all got our own sensibility, our own, kansai, the Japanese word that was used to describe it. You know, we all express ourselves in different ways. And I guess I'd rather put my energy into mentoring and educating and helping others rather than the physically making of the garment. So that's why I don't go there. But I'm helping people next weekend. My daughter-in-law is coming over. I'm going to help her make something. So I'd rather do that than actually kind of be caught in the making garment cycles. Can you see the demise of the business wardrobe and even fast fashion? Well, look, I think fast fashion is really on the nose. I think we've really, certainly amongst all the people I know, we've raised awareness around that. So I think that is probably, on the way out. What was the start of that question? Sorry.
I'll retrieve it for you.
Oh, thank you. There was just a point at the beginning and I addressed the end of it as the fast fashion.
Would you like to move on to another question and I'll find it?
Yes, okay. So, love to use soy milk to create the dye pattern with your dress. Are these techniques something you teach? Yeah, I have done some eco colour classes, but there's probably people that know a lot more than me in that space. India Flint is the expert on that, and so she's got a couple of books called Eco Colour, and the other one, its name I can't remember. So yeah, I'm more just play-based experimenting, and so that's what I would encourage you to do. If you've got a gas burner outside, the gum leaves are a great place to start, and the beautiful eucalyptus smells fabulous, but you can also use bark. I've used red bark from my local bush. I've just been using the avocado pips. Tea is actually quite a good thing as well, and onion skins are fabulous. If you save a big lot of them, boil them up in a pot and drop a garment in. The protein fibres like silk and wool will take the colour a lot more. The reason I used the soy milk on this was to help the plant fibre, the linen, absorb more colour. So it puts protein in it and it absorbs the colour more. Can we see just going back to that other part of the question, can I see the demise of the business wardrobe? Well, I think definitely. And people have got the idea that, comfy clothes at home. The problem is we're sort of judged by what we wear. So I guess if people are wanting to be sort of high status and look important, they're going to want to wear business wear. But, particularly, I know one talk I did, one of the chairman of the group, when I was talking about how many times you wear a garment, he said, well, I'm definitely doing slow clothing because I've worn my suit about 400 times. So, like some business wear is great, but to me, it's actually about comfort. And it's probably more, we'll see the demise of the high heels. I'd like to see, I take the point that they look fantastic, but what price to be paying for looking fantastic? So, yeah, I think this period will see us change our attitude to a lot of things. Have I considered offering an online course on slow fashion, probably in response to the current situation? I probably could. I'm not that much of an expert. I feel I've learnt by doing. My postgraduate qualification was in leadership. It wasn't really in fashion. And a lot of my techniques are a bit what Otto van Bush talks about, hacktivism. So I'll just find out a way to make it work. So I don't really feel I'm expert enough to be teaching. And it's the ideas that I like to share are just do it, like just have a go. Like there is no rule. I think some of the TAFE courses are teaching a little bit more now, more in this upcycling area. And I certainly would, I go to do a lot of talks in schools and at some like teachers of textiles, which is now design. So I'm often invited to teach there, but the idea of setting up a whole course, well, maybe I can look into that when I do my Churchill Fellowship, but, you know, I'd never say never, it might happen. And I think collaborating with people is the go. So, you know, we've got the technology to do it now. So I guess we'll just see what happens. 2021, 2022 might be there.
Thank you. I think that's all the list of questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Jane?
I think
questions that you get.
Yeah. Well, oh yes, the natural fibres and the use of water and cotton.
Yeah, they're probably the two I'd really love.
It's a really big issue for people, and I do understand it. But I guess my very first job after I graduated in ag science was to interview all the cotton growers in Queensland about their level of adoption of what was called then integrated pest management. Like, I'm going back decades, and back then was when they used to spray a lot, you know, 8, 9, 10 times with what was called endosulfan, and they were calling it a soft chemical. And now it's banned. So that was back then, but the integrated pest management is actually using all the positive bugs to help control the insect pests. So now a lot of cotton growers will only, you know, they have someone inspect their crop, trained to look at all that. So they're really minimally applying any external pesticide to manage the insects, because cotton forms in the head, so it's particularly yummy, and that's what the growers have got to protect against. But just talking about water use, another job I had, you know, before I was stepped into this arena was with a water resource efficiency project. And a lot of the agricultural industries were granted federal money to be more efficient on farm with how they use water. And so our growers, you know, and I wrote about this, our Australian growers were, I have no affiliation with the cotton industry, I have to say, but they, you know, they've reduced their water consumption by up to 40%. So it is an issue, but the main thing for wearers of clothes to get their head around is it's actually about wearing the cotton for a long time. If you wear the cotton for a long time, the water used initially is diminishing over time. So that's the main thing. We don't waste these natural resources, that we keep finding ways to continually reinvent and reuse them. And ultimately there may be, in the circular economy, some reclaiming of these fibres, extracting the value from them, but that also requires more energy. So the best place is for us as the wearers to keep wearing things for longer. Yeah. Is hemp still a growing textile industry, or has it flashed and faded? Look, it hasn't really arisen in Australia yet. There's small, you know, there's definitely a hemp association trying to get things going. And I think it'd be a great fibre. A researcher that I spoke to said it doesn't use appreciably less water than cotton. So it definitely would be a great natural fibre to have in the arsenal. But the problem for Australian growers is they tend not to want to grow something that they haven't got a market for. So it's real chicken and egg. Hemp is a fabulous crop in that you can use there's lots of different products that come from it, but the fibre actually comes from the stem. Unlike cotton, it comes from the flower. So the stem requires it's got to be, you know, mashed up a lot and, you know, to be produced into fibre. So it's not as readily accessible as cotton, perhaps. So definitely it would be great to see that. regards to natural fibres and local production, would you also like to share your view with regards to Australian wool in terms of ethical production?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, in Queensland and parts of New South Wales, the issue around wool, one of the issues that has arisen globally is the use of mulesing as a technique to manage fly strike. So some growers you can buy unmulesed wool, and those growers are using management techniques. So really, I think it can eventually be phased out. But wool is actually a fabulous product because it's renewable. Like the sheep grows it, it's shorn to allow the sheep to, not have to carry all around that burden. So it's a renewable resource. And even though we've had the odd bit of footage show, that a bit of, animal abuse in sheds, which is not the norm at all. And like everything, there's always some issues there, but I actually feel wool is fabulous because it is renewable, and it's a classic one to put in the compost afterwards. I mean, cotton as well, but wool can break down and return nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and so it's actually a great resource, and I think it's a fabulous fabric. The issue that I personally have with it is that it seems in our climates here, unless you're wearing it all the time and you store it very carefully over the summer, it can get munched. And so because it's a desire, I guess it's desirable, the insects want it. But yeah, I guess everybody just tries their best. And I think when you look at the Australian Wool Innovation website, they talk a lot about ethical farmers, and farmers want to be in business and in industry for the long term. And, they're aware of that customers' desire for local product, for ethical product is arising. So they're doing good things in that way. But I don't speak for the wool industry either, and that's, I guess, what I've been able to do is have independent voice. I think that's really the most important thing around what I've been doing is I'm not associated with the fashion industry. I know about, agriculture. I have always worked with my own hands, so I sort of know about that. And, I'm just speaking my truth and raising these issues. And I have been astounded by what has emerged since I started. Notice that pile of excess clothing that I bought 30 shirts for $60 at this Fashion for Flood fundraiser. And I sort of thought, what's going on here? The fact that and then I rediscovered op shops and realised there was so much being moved along. And so that started me on the journey of thinking, well, I don't operate like that. And so I just realised I had a different story to tell. And I think where we're going now is really looking at that pile of excess and the dumping that is on op shops. I think that charity sector, the government, with the national waste strategy, textiles are not really mentioned. And I think there's the opportunity for op shops as the ultimate in the circular economy to actually be part of that solution of moving the clothes around. Because one of the issues is a lot of our secondhand clothes that we think we're doing the right thing donating, only about, and I had these figures in my book, about 15% are sold locally at op shops. About 15% become industrial rags. Another 15% to 25% goes to landfill because it's not sort of good enough for anyone. And the other quantity, which is anything, 40 to 50%, goes into the global second-hand trade. And from Australia, it goes to the UAE, Pakistan and Malaysia, is as far as I knew, a few years ago when I looked at that. And countries, obviously then from the UAE, it's probably moved into Africa, and countries there are wanting to stop that trade, because there's textile mountains there that are, so we're shifting our waste offshore, and it's sold. It's not donated. It's sold for about $1 a kilo. So I think that market is unsustainable, and it's also impacting the local textile industry wherever we're shunting it to. I mean, there's definitely a need for it for some, with refugees and the like. There's a need for that, but I think we have to be really careful about that. We're, just as we've realised that we're dumping all our plastic in China, well, we were, until that was stopped, and now I think that issues are rising with the clothing as well. It's just not really an avenue that we're going to be able to continue with. So we need other solutions locally.
A whole other conversation, isn't it? Particularly even with op shops being given landfill levies by government, but rebates, I should say. I noticed also we should just say hello to Andrew, who has joined.
Hi, Jane.
A very different kind of recycler. And
well, not if you listen. The wording is very similar. We're talking about listening to Jane there. I just wrote a few things down because that export. The same concerns in the battery industry and power tool industry is that people can resell them and reuse them in other markets, but it's not ideal.
And I think, we'll be reflecting on all of this as a result of the pandemic, won't we? And the slowdown and the increasing price in freight and that kind of thing. So, we're at a real time of change. I had a question for you, actually, Andrew. It's probably not quite your area, but I'm really curious about the recycling of solar battery, the solar panels go on the roof. And as I gather, not all of them are recycled, like you'd think a new technology like that have that built in, that, with, cradle to cradle stuff, we know. But that's not the case, is it?
No, and, again, you talk about farmers not wanting to grow a product because they have got nowhere to sell it. So no one wants to start recycling solar panels because no one's reusing the products that come out of them. So it's the chicken and egg, those sort of acronyms are so perfect for exactly the same problem. But you can certainly recycle solar panels. However, no one's collecting them. So if you have a solar panel and you try and drop them off somewhere, they'll take them and put them in landfill. It's not a banned substance, not a banned item to landfill. There's no drop-off network for solar panels, and we looked at it, but we couldn't even find more than 500 panels to look at. We're starting to see people wanting volume to be taken, but we're saying, well, unless it's a continual volume, we can't build the machinery to do it. It is difficult unless it's mandated or regulated or whatever system you want to use. There has to be something, but landfill has to stop with it first, and then that's where, again, I liked your comments about not wanting to run education or not running to run thing, because I'm not an expert, but you really are. And without hearing your whole conversation, is exactly the same story. We see you go, oh no, we're not anything special. We've just learned this because we had a problem to solve. But it's turned out we are experts in what we do, and we just did like solving problems, and that's how we came about doing it. And you think everyone's the same, but they're not. Most people, not that they can't be bothered, but they don't look at it as an opportunity or as an interest to try and fix. And it's quite interesting to hear you talk about textiles in the same way we think about batteries and
Well, I look forward to hearing your talk, Andrew.
That's probably a nice segue, actually. Thank you, Andrew. You made a good job.
No, well, I was a bit worried I'd be looking at myself and having no one to talk to, thinking this is...
it's been a long day. It's all good. Don't worry, we'll find you someone to talk to. If not today, ongoing. We're on a mission to make everyone lithium-ion miners. Anyway, on to that in a minute. Jane, thank you so much. That was so enlightening. Every time I think I know a lot about something, I come to one of my own sessions, and that's why I'm doing this.
Oh, great. Thank you for organising it, Jennifer. It's excellent.
Really, really interesting. Thank you so much. And any key points you want to leave us on?
Oh, look, I think I've laboured it enough, haven't it, about thinking more,
Yes.
choosing natural fibres where you can, and extending the life of what you've already got as, you know, great strategies for minimising your material footprint.
I just love the way, something I didn't really understand but do now a lot better, is the way your argument around building on something. So clothing not being a finite thing, being like
clothing evolution is what it is. We evolve it in our own wardrobe to suit ourselves as we get bigger, smaller, or our tastes change.
Yeah, indeed. Very clever. Love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you.
We'll definitely see you around even tonight. And